Hey, hold on a minute. Hold on. Wow, here we all are. Can you hear me? Everyone,
Yep.
their thumbs up. They're good. All right. We're just missing Robert Bills. I tested with Robert. Fred Arnowich dropped out like 20 minutes ago. So today is a bit different. I'm doing it from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I don't have all my equipment, so nor do I have my bandwidth. And I don't even have my piece of sheet that I read off of, my piece of paper.
I'm walking. This is not professional enough. I'm going to have to leave.
Oh man, Meredith, you were always tough back then, a tough act back then. So let me just start with the opening. Welcome to Getting to Know You. This started as a informal gathering of the few people from class in 1975, and it's grown to I'm booked until August. So the month of June will be the class in 1971, and then we're doing the 60s and the 50s, and we're doing well. So I just want to make you all aware that who are on this show right now, this is being recorded. So don't say anything you don't want anyone to remember, because it'll be on YouTube for until time immemorial. So our guests tonight are Nancy Navin. So wave, Nancy. All right. We have Jon Rappaport. We actually specifically did this for Jon because he had to push this out until the 24th. So I only had one person, and then I guilted everyone else into joining. So we have Merideth Melville in the upper right-hand corner, whoever was that Hollywood square person, and we have Garry Hughes. So I'm glad you're feeling better, Garry. I know that there was a risk of you not joining. So I know that you all have better things to be doing on a Monday evening, but I do appreciate you being here. And we'll just start out with the first question that I usually ask people. And so with Nancy Navin, where did you go to grammar school? Where did you grow up in Wantagh, and how did your family end up in Wantagh?
I didn't move to Wantagh till 10th grade. So I was in North Massapequa before that. But my family was always very attached to Wantagh because we went to the Wantagh Congregational Church. So I knew a lot of Wantagh people through there before we moved here. And then I was here from 10th to 12th grade.
Wow. And I graduated in 74, and a year early. So I remember you from high school, but I didn't realize that it had only been 1 year. So which high school were you in Massapequa?
No, I went all 3 years to high school, 10th, 11th, and 12th.
Oh, you did? 10th, 11th, 12th. So, but before that, you were in
I was in Howard.
In Massapequa.
Howard and Farmingdale.
Okay. Oh, in Farmingdale. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Great.
But I'm still in Wantagh, which a lot of people aren't. Wantagh is still a big part of my life. So.
Oh, you still live? You live there? Or?
I live in Belmore, but I most of my work is in Wantagh. So I've watched it change over the years, and I'm here.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that change in a little bit anyway. So it's good to know when you came in. So let's go to Jon Rappaport. And I just want you to know, Jon, all the guys I knew wanted to be Jon Rappaport because you were the guy in high school. So I just want you to know that. So, but anyhow, John, tell the same story. Where are you from? What school did you go to? And what part of Wantagh did you live in? And how'd your parents end up there?
I moved to Wantagh, I was told, when I was 4, from Forest Hills. And we lived in the Holiday Park Drive area. I lived on Jonathan Lane. I went to, I believe my kindergarten was at Forest Lake. Yeah. But then starting first grade, started busing to Sunrise Park. And wow. Then on to junior high and high school.
Wow, you know, Robert Berg and some other people have said the same story that, you know, they split up that Forest Lake area based on Robert Berg's address. And anyone to the left of him went to Sunrise Park. Anyone to the right of him, you know, went elsewhere. So went to Forest Lake. All right, in the upper right-hand corner, there's Merideth Melville, who was my neighbor. And she moved out of the neighborhood for better digs, I do believe. So so Merideth, I know that you're all letter M, all your sisters, but so why don't you say where you went to elementary school, how your parents got there, and up to there? Go ahead.
Well, let's see. My parents met in Austin during World War II because my mother's from a very small town called San Saba. And my dad was a pilot. He dropped paratroopers behind enemy lines. And he was in Austin buying some cigarettes and happened to meet my mother. And my dad is from New York City. And they had a whirlwind romance and they got married. And after the war, they moved to New York City. And then they moved to Wantagh on Hope Place, where my sister Melody was born. And I've got 4 sisters, Melody, Carol, Monica, and Melissa. And then when I was born, we lived on Manchester Road. And that's where we grew up before we moved to Texas. And we were right by the forest. I mean, just ride your bike down the street, you were in the woods. So I spent a lot of time there. We were on the corner of Manchester and Wagner. And I went to Beach Street Elementary, and I went to Wantagh Junior High. And then we moved to, my dad was an Otis elevator salesman, and my mother missed Texas so badly, we moved to Houston when I was ready to start high school, Wantagh High School. And moved to Houston, hated it, horrible, terrible. I did meet the guy that I'm with now, Garry, and we fell in love. But then I've been around all over Texas. I've lived in El Paso, San Antonio, Dallas. I went to school at UT Austin, and I can't seem to, I've tried to get out and go back to New York, but it has not worked. So
okay. All right. Well, I'm going to tell some stories about trick-or-treating at your house and your dad. But anyhow, so let's go to Garry Hughes, who I actually got to see in January in Vero Beach. And he's right. Very much, yeah, I was playing baseball and Garry was golfing. So Garry, tell us where you lived, what elementary school, and how you ended up being in Wantagh.
Well, you probably all remember the Rusty Hinge, a bar on Wantagh Avenue. Maybe not. I don't know. I know it's not there anymore, but we lived right across the street from there. Whoa.
Go ahead. Sorry. Garry, go ahead.
Okay. And I will also verify what you said about Rappaport, because I went to Sunrise Park Elementary School as well, and every guy wanted to be John. I was almost John, almost. You had to be really good in sports. You had to be really smart, and you had to be musically inclined. least that's how I remember.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I've known John for probably the longest time of most people. Originally, my parents were in Syosset. Before that, they were both from the Brooklyn area. They ended up splitting when I was a young kid, so I didn't come to. I went to kindergarten in Syosset, and then we moved down to the apartment in Wantagh for first grade through sixth at Sunrise Park, and then the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know John's getting a big head from all of this, thinking, wow. But anyhow, John, it's all true. We all wanted to be John Rappaport.
Well, it's hard for me to believe sitting here listening to you, but I'll take it. I'll take it.
So, John, let's start with you on this question. What did you do the day after graduation? You left Wantagh. Did you leave Wantagh? Did you go to college? Yes, obviously you went to college. What was your life like after Wantagh? Go ahead, and you can take 5 minutes.
Sure. Okay. I was pretty focused on. I always wanted to be a veterinarian, and I was very focused on that probably from 9th grade on. And I worked at veterinary hospitals from 9th grade through 12th grade. I ended up going to. I only applied to colleges on the East Coast that had vet schools, which was Cornell, Illinois, and Georgia. I got into all three and ended up going to Georgia on the advice of my advisor, because at the time they said you're better off going to an easier school and getting a high GPA that would give me a better chance of getting into vet school. So I ended up down in Georgia, which was quite an experience. I loved it. It was very different, but I had a really great time down there. I ended up getting into veterinary school at the University of Florida. So I spent 4 years in Gainesville. I then went on to do an internship up in Boston at one of the top hospitals in the world, Angel Memorial Animal Hospital. And I became very interested in internal medicine, and I ended up applying for a residency at Tufts in small animal internal medicine, and I ended up going there for, it was like another 2.5 years, and I specialized in internal medicine, fiber optic scoping, 2D ultrasound, laparoscopy, and I was actually offered a job to teach gastroenterology at Tufts, but my parents at that point, I think the salary was about $16,000 a year, and I think my parents at that point said, John, it's time to go get a job, and I didn't want to work for anybody, and I felt like I had a very good education, felt very confident, so I ended up moving down to. I wanted to open up in New York actually. But this was, I finished my residency in 1986. And if you remember, that's when real estate in New York had doubled and tripled in price. And I could not find a place to open up that made any financial sense. I had been very familiar with South Florida. And back in the 80s, it literally was like the Wild West down there. There were still like dairy farms along Biscayne Boulevard. And I ended up opening up my first hospital down there in 1986, and just went on from there.
Wow, that's very cool. I have a niece who has just become a veterinarian, fully fledged veterinarian after many years of schooling.
Yeah, and I think I was in school for like 14 years.
Wow.
Yeah, she did similar specialties, and she's been in school forever, and she's very happy, and just now a full-fledged vet and loves it. So, John, I don't know if you can see the screen, but just below you is your picture. So with the long hair.
That's
Long
about
dark.
the same. One thing that you probably don't know is back in 1981, I got into a really, really bad car accident. And I was literally pronounced dead at the accident,
Wow.
put in a body bag and delivered to the North Shore Hospital morgue.
Wow.
Yeah. And before I had a toe tag on, and they were about ready to push me into the freezer when they thought they saw a breath. And they rushed me up to intensive care, and I was in a deep coma. And my head had hit the steering wheel, and I had bilateral orbital blowout fractures. My nose was gone. I broke every single bone in this area of my face. My maxilla was pretty much disintegrated. And I ended up spending about 3 months in the hospital getting my whole face rebuilt. They took bone from my hip, cartilage from my ear. So when I got out of the hospital, I mean, I haven't seen anybody in quite a long time, so I'm sure you guys don't notice, but my people, when I got out of the hospital, people that I knew since childhood had no idea who I was.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's why I don't quite like that picture. Although, because of the pandemic, my hair is about the same.
Yeah. Well, I'll say
about 13 months. Yeah.
I'll say I still want to be Jon Rappaport. Do you play tennis still?
I don't play tennis, but I'm a gym addict. I work out 7 days a week. I bike. I stairmaster. I do weights. That's a big part of my life today.
Okay, that's great. So we're going to go to the person who was late to the show, Bob Bills. And Bob does all of the stuff you do. He does gym, he rides a bike, it was amazing. He was telling me all the things that he does. And I said, you must not be married because he doesn't have time to do all that stuff and be home for somebody. Anyway, hey, Bob, the first question so you can catch up is, just let people know where you grew up in Wantagh, how your parents ended up there, and what elementary school you went to.
Well, I believe I ended up there because I think my father was from Merrick and my mother was from Freeport. Somehow they met, and they moved into Wantagh in Darby Road East. And when we left there and moved to Valentine Place, which was real close to Belmore, the Bragers moved in there. Charlie Brager was in our class. And so I grew up there, graduated Wantagh, and then did 2 years of Farmingdale and then moved out. So I think that's how we ended up there.
All right, cool. All right. So we're going to go to Merideth. You told a little bit about your story, and I have to say, I saw a house that you built online, and I said to you, please come to Maryland. I'll buy a piece of property on another piece of property on the Chesapeake, and you can make that house. But tell us what happened to you I guess you went to UT. Is that where you went?
Yeah.
What you've been doing with your life?
Well, I graduated in Houston, and as I said, I was not very happy being in Houston, but I traveled a lot. I went to Europe. I went to Central America. I didn't graduate college until I was about 28 because I worked a lot and played a lot. I went to UT Austin. I have a Bachelor of Science in Radio, TV, and Film. And I moved to El Paso. My ex-husband was a pediatrician there. He grew up there and came to Dallas and opened a practice with him, and then decided that I did not want to really be married to him anymore. And I was actually on my way back to New York because I was going to fulfill sort of the dream of living in the city. And I ended up getting a job for the Travel Channel. So I traveled the world for about 2 or 3 years and went all over the place and produced and wrote travel videos. And it was a dream job. And then eventually started some film production companies in Houston. and I've been doing that for several years. I have a 17-year-old son, Tucker, and I'm building a house. It's not done. I've been building it with Garry. He's my boyfriend, and we're together. We hadn't seen each other in 35 years in high school, and I was friends with his mother. She got ill. He came to see her. We hadn't seen each other in 35 years. Discovered we still had feelings. He was my high school boyfriend, my prom date. Discovered we still had feelings for each other. We've been together now 6 years. And we've been building a house together, framed it ourselves, but it's 4 years. And we're still building the house. But we're almost in the house. So that's kind of my story. I have a film company. It's called Boss Media. And I produce and I write and I direct. And you can go on my website and see my stuff. I have a blog called Mother Tucker's Lounge. My son's name is Tucker, so I write a blog. And that's about it. Settled down quite a bit.
Do we get to see your stuff on any kind of TV?
Well, I don't know if you'd ever see anything on a national basis, but done a lot of advertising, a lot of spots, music videos, and I'm working on the documentary about the house. I've been building this house for 4 years now, and my goal is to edit the video, get some funding, and do a documentary and write a book. My big goal is to write a book, and it's probably going to be somewhat of a memoir. And Wantagh will play pretty prominently in it, actually.
Cool.
So I'm in the arts and building the house and raising my son, and I don't travel anymore. All my money is going towards my house, but spent a lot of time, Singapore and Borneo and Southeast Asia and lots of Europe and Germany, and I worked at NASA too. Worked in the public affairs department. I interviewed all the astronauts before they went on board on the shuttle. So I did that for 2 years too. So
cool. It sounds like you've led a cool life. I think the two of us, I've been to 116 countries, so
I know.
Probably have been to a lot of the same countries.
Yes. And what is it? Oops. I think, okay.
No, good.
What is it that you do, that you travel to all those companies?
It was USAID. It was international development. We lost Garry. Garry will come back on in a minute, I believe. But yeah, that allowed me. When I was in school, all I wanted to do was travel. So I found a career that allowed me to travel. So, anyway, do you want to just tell people what your dad used to do on Halloween when you guys lived on Hope Court? I don't know whether you did the same thing on Manchester.
Yeah, I think it was Manchester Road too. But my dad was a big character, and he was actually on What's My Line. Soupy Sales, guessed his profession. I hated Soupy Sales after that. But my dad sold elevators for Otis Elevator in New York City. And my dad he'd get a big pumpkin and he'd put it in the window and he carved it out and put a microphone in the pumpkin. And he was Old Joe Pumpkin. And he would sing a song about being Old Joe Pumpkin. And when you looked out, then he'd have cocktails, down the street with somebody. And my sisters would run over and say, Daddy, you've got to come right now. And he would come back and there would be a crowd of like 50 people on the lawn, because all the kids believed, of course, it was Old Joe Pumpkin. And he would sing a song and be Old Joe Pumpkin every year. And he was pretty impressive in that way.
No, I do remember, and my brothers definitely remember. So remember that happening. So, and telling me about it. So, and I should let you know that my nephew works for Otis and senior management in Otis, and he's gotten a job for everyone in his family, in my family, for Otis out in California and Hawaii and west of the Mississippi. So it's pretty amazing how many people work for Otis.
Oh,
So Garry, it's your turn. So I know that you went offline and you could just, bop back in as you did. So
Yeah.
and so Garry, what was your trajectory after you left Wantagh?
Let's see. Well, first, my mom, I was the youngest, so my mom moved back to Syosset. I went to college up at Union College in Schenectady. Some of you may know Fred Berkowitz, but we went up there together. We both studied electrical engineering. And after 4 years, I was able to earn 2 degrees in 4 years, a bachelor's and a master's, and then when I was fortunate enough to get a job at IBM. So the one I chose was down in the East Fishkill, Poughkeepsie area. That's halfway to Albany in New York State. And I was there since 1979. So very, very boring. I got to use my engineering for about 10 years as a hardware designer and a programmer. Then became a manager. Then became an executive, and enjoyed a nice career. And I've been retired about 4 years. And like John, I'm a fitness nut. I do a slightly different set of things, but it's all about the way I and I know this isn't true, but the year I turned 60, I said every year from now I'm going to get a year younger, and in order to do that, I got to eat better and I got to work harder and stuff like that. So according to that theory, I just turned 56 yesterday.
Oh, happy birthday!
Yeah. Too bad I spent it with a fever in bed with probably Lyme disease, but at least it's not COVID. So I got that going for me.
Yeah. So you are a golfing fanatic. Would that be accurate?
I do, and in fact, I'll trace that to I played on my lone varsity letter was with the golf team. Harry Samuelson was on that team. Some of you may know Harry. And in fact, I still see Harry, and we'll still play around every now and then. But yeah, that's where it started, and I pretty much didn't play for about 30 years because I don't know, other things were more interesting. And then about 15 years ago, it got fun again. So I started to play, and I've gotten pretty good. Nothing like what you watched yesterday if you watched the PGA, but I can get around the course pretty good, and I really enjoy walking and carrying my bag and all that good stuff. So yes, it's a good way, a good hobby to have at this point in my life.
Great. All right, we'll be coming back to you for more questions. So we're going to go to Nancy Navin. So Nancy, you graduate from Wantagh High School, and what happens? What's your trajectory?
I went to Hartwick College up in Oneonta, where I got an economics degree. And then I got a job with, it was called Brooklyn Union Gas. Now I guess it's National Grid. And I worked there as a market analyst. And while I was there, I went back to Adelphi and got my MBA with a concentration in marketing and finance. And I loved the job. I did a lot of traveling. I worked marketing with the RD&D department. We had so much fun, but I had my first child, and then I had a second child who is a special needs child. So I kind of had to change my direction because I needed to be home for her. So I sat home for about a year and didn't do much, but that didn't work for me. So then I became a real estate agent, and I've been a real estate agent now for about 34 years. And I just love it. I work primarily in Wantagh. That's why I said I know about all the changes in Wantagh. I sell Wantagh to people, although Wantagh has always been one of the best towns to live in. And I make a nice living doing it. And the prices in Wantagh and Seaford and Belmore are now through the roof. I mean, I worked through the pandemic. I guess I took a month or two off. But last year and this year have been my best years because houses are just so in demand now. I'm sure everyone knows that. You have an open house, you have lines around the block, you have so many people interested in moving into this community. it's fantastic. So that's
I-
basically what
Yeah,
I've been doing.
I put a house that was for sale on. I lived in Wantagh, and it was on Riverside Drive. 1.6 million, $36,000 taxes per year.
Wow.
So that's crazy.
The average price in Wantagh right now is probably 600,000 to 700,000. It's unbelievable when you look at these houses and see what things are going for, and no one cares. They'll pay it. It's unbelievable. I mean, Wantagh is a great town. Don't get me wrong, but I didn't know it was as great as it was. I grew up in a house across the street from Beach Street School, and I lived there for all through college, and then I bought a house in Wantagh, South Wantagh, and now I live in Belmore now, but I still do a lot of business all around here.
Where did you live? Which house across from Beach Street School?
Directly across the street, there were two houses. There was a little gray house, and then there was my house. Not the corner, not by the field, the one right in the middle. It was just built the year we moved in. We moved into a new house. So
no, I recall where that is.
And I had a lot of great memories.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because my parents bought two homes on Princeton, at the end of Princeton Drive North and Temple Drive, and the woods, and there was just farms behind the house. And my grandmother and her mother lived next door, and I grew up next door to that. And so they paid like $4,700, $4,800.
It's unbelievable. And you know what I think is the most unbelievable thing is we all grew up here. Did you ever hear the word the woods? You never. I lived in the woods. I never knew I lived in the woods. Now, it wasn't called the woods. It was just called Wantagh. And it's so funny. I remember once going to the gym and the people around me were all saying, "Oh, I live in the woods." And I'm like, "Oh, you live in Wantagh?" "No, I live in the woods." And we didn't even ever call it the woods. It just built itself up to be this standalone place being so wonderful. And I'm not saying it isn't wonderful, but it's funny how over time things develop. And I don't remember hearing the term the woods until probably in the 80s or 90s.
Yeah, obviously I had the woods right behind my house, and so did Merideth. In both places she lived, and until the Seaford Oyster Bay came in, there were farmhouses, abandoned farmhouses, and we used to hide out in there, play fort in there, play Ring Alivio, the whole 9 yards, hide and seek. So
our bikes, and we had tree forts, and the little pond would freeze over, and we'd ice skate, and we'd swim in there in the summertime. And
none of that anymore.
Oh, I know. I went back recently. I hadn't been back in a long time for our high school reunion, and I really just kind of cried when I looked at Manchester Road, and it didn't look real good.
It's funny. The first thing people do when they move, most of them are moving out from the city, and they move to the woods. The first thing they do is cut down all the trees. So it's not going to be the woods much longer.
I was just kind of heartbroken to see sort of, I mean, I know it's progress and all that, but in so many ways it was just so idyllic. I talked to my son about the ladybugs and the grass you could actually walk in that felt good on your feet, and staying out late and playing Ring Alivio and kickball in the street. And it's very foreign.
And all the little tiny, it was very eclectic with little tiny bungalows, and now everyone's knocking them down and building up these McMansions, sticking as big a house as they can on these lots. So it really is changing.
Island Road had the old homes in Wantagh Avenue, as I recall, and everything.
And beach and bunker.
Yeah, the big homes that were there. So I don't want to keep Bob Bill's waiting, because I know that as the last one in, and as I would say the most fit of all of us, it would be Bob Bills.
How do you know that?
Well, I just go by your word the other day, and and I saw you at the last reunion. So anyway, why don't you tell us your trajectory after high school was over? What happened?
Well, one of the questions you asked earlier I didn't answer was I did go to Forest Lake, and then from there the junior high and high school. So when I graduated high school, I went to Farmingdale, did their aerospace technology program, which was kind of a minor in management and also in maintenance. And I got my private pilot's license. I transferred in '77 down to Embry-Riddle in Daytona, and got my 4-year down there and the rest of my ratings. Came back for 2 summers just to work. Summer '78, '79. Never came back after that. Pretty much my whole family moved out. My sister was down in Maryland, somewhere around where you are. My other sister, Susie, moved down. I forget what year it was. After I left Daytona, I went down to flight instructor in Palm Beach. Did that for about 1.5 years. And then I got a job flying private jets for the owner of the Boston Celtics down out of Fort Lauderdale. Did that for 5 years. Just got to see a lot of stuff. That it was an interesting job, but it didn't pay anything. And then I got on with the airlines in '88, beginning of '88, and I'm still there. Got about 17 months left. So, like you, I've done a lot of traveling, some with work, others, for fun. And 22 years, I windsurfed all over the world, mostly Maui, but it was kind of a fun thing to do. And then just traveling for vacations, skiing, snowboarding, mountain biking, stuff like that.
And,
what airline for?
Go ahead.
Airlines, American,
Okay.
out of Miami.
So, do you live near Jon Rappaport? What town do you live in, Bob?
I live in Hillsborough Beach. Where do you live, John?
I'm in Miami Beach.
Okay. Yeah, I'm
I'm on an American flight about every other week. So
but I usually fly out of Lauderdale. Lauderdale, West Palm.
Miami. Yeah.
I'll be in Miami twice this month because I've got Jackson Hole layovers. So I picked up those so I can go to Jackson Hole in the summertime.
Very nice, man.
Maybe I'll see you. You know who else is down here is Steve Branley. And I remember he gave me his number to go fishing at the 40-year reunion. I don't know what I did with it, but he's down in this plantation or Hollywood, something like that. But I don't know where he is. I think
I think there's a lot of people down in Florida.
Every day there's more.
I think Ricky Malang is there.
Who's that?
Ricky Malang.
I don't remember. I recognize the name, but I can't. I remember running into Garry Hughes down in Shooters one night. We were down there with the cigarette boat, and I ran into him down there. And this was a long time ago, probably the '90s. And he was at one of the reunions. I think he's still down here somewhere. But Florida's getting crowded.
But Bob, in your neighborhood, just a little bit of discussion about Wantagh. Can we all pretty much name everyone from our neighborhood? I remember visiting your house and hanging out with you sometimes, and you had some interesting people on your block.
Nobody was in my grade. They were either older or younger. I used to hang out a lot with a guy named Tad Landon. He was down on the corner, and Kevin Doolittle. He was on Hannington. They were 2 years younger than us, but they were somebody. Kenny Fox was right around the corner.
I remember Kenny Fox. Yeah.
Right, and then I forget his first name, but Colella, I think, was right next to his house.
Earl
Colella, that's right. He was next to him, and then the Flemings were the next block over. Ewell, I think it was. But right on my block, most of the people were a little older or younger. I don't think there was anybody in our grade on my exact block. Peter Esposito was down the other end of the road, closer to Old Mill.
Yeah.
But on my actual block, and then at the end of my block was actually Belmore. I was only 4 houses away from Belmore.
Yeah, I remember that. So Merideth, which neighborhood do you remember? Do you remember Hope Court, or is it Manchester?
No, I don't remember Hope Court. That's Melody and Carol, and I think Monica were born there. and then
Yeah.
and Melissa were in Wantagh. But right around us was, Howard Rosen, the Drummonds, Nancy McKenna, the Ravens, Dana Robinson. I hung out a lot with the Manger family, which was on the other side of the railroad tracks. The Madoffs, Lisa
Oh
Madoff,
yeah. Yeah.
um,
Cool.
Billy Becker, Keith Wilson. They were
Oh
all
gosh. Billy Becker. I haven't heard that
Billy
name in years. And
Billy
Keith Wilson.
Keith Wilson.
So, all right. So I have two more questions I'm going to ask. I'm going to start out with Garry. So Garry, when you were in school, high school, did you end up becoming what you thought you would be? We all have thoughts of what we're going to be in high school. We lost Garry. So Nancy, let's go to Nancy. Did what you were thinking about, did you end up being?
Kind of. Towards the end, I kind of realized that I wanted to go into some sort of business. And so I guess kind of, because I am still in my own business now, I guess. So I guess I did. There's one question I keep thinking that I think would be a good question for you to ask people when they're on this show is, being 64 now, what would you have told you at 15 in high school? Because I think all of us look back and go, what would we have done differently? And when I was in high school, I didn't have any confidence. I think that's what I was lacking. And for some reason, when I went to college, I all of a sudden somewhere got all this confidence. And I wish that I could have told myself, get that confidence in high school, because I see all these people hearing and talking, and I don't remember anyone in high school. I think I just kind of stayed to myself. But I think that would be an unusual question to ask people. Like, what would you have told yourself that would have made maybe a different life for you? So that's one of the things I remember about high school.
Yeah, people have touched on the edge of that, in that, what you're saying about confidence, because I don't believe I had any confidence. Although I knew that I was smart and capable, when we went to school, it just wasn't in to be smart. It was, if you didn't have confidence, it was very hard to show what you were. And then, the minute I got into college and, 70, I graduated in 74, and like, I could do as well as I wanted. And it was like, holy shit, who knew, that you could do that. And, and get 4 O's and then go to, get a master's and get a PhD. And John, just so you know, my only regret in life is that I didn't get an MD. It was when I got accepted to University of Michigan, Harvard, and Harvard. And it was at that moment, that second, that I realized I could have gone to med school and I could have been a doctor. Instead, I chose public health. But and it's funny because you could have all this knowledge, and if you're around an MD, they're always smarter. So I guess that's I'm at Johns Hopkins, and it doesn't matter how much IT and public health I know, MDs know more. So just that's what I've learned in life.
You seem pretty accomplished, and I would love to see that list of countries that you've been to. That's impressive.
Yeah, well, it's somewhere. I keep that running list. It gets harder and harder as you get more travel to find a new one. But the one obvious one I haven't been to is Australia. But
unusual.
Yeah. But
be one of my first.
Right, but I've got Africa on all of you. That I've and the Caribbean. So Garry is coming back in. So so John, you did pursue what you want, right? You wanted to be a vet.
I did, but interestingly enough, I ended up going in a totally different direction. After I practiced for probably about 13, 14 years. I opened a number of clinics up in South Florida. And back in '98, when the internet came around, I got this crazy idea to create the ultimate interactive educational library for pet owners, to give pet owners 24/7 up-to-date information on how to take the best care of their pet. And I ended up hiring someone to run my practices, and I jumped into and started this new company. And that was a wild ride for me. I could tell you stories all night long about the craziness in San Francisco during that time. But long story short, we ended up creating one of the top pet information sites in the world. And I'm sure you guys remember AOL back in the day. And we actually were 100% of the pet channel. I supplied all the articles and content for that channel and all their other properties. And that was a lot of fun. It was very different than practicing every day, and learned quite a bit about business and the internet. And it was a great experience. I ended up selling that company back in 2013. I sold all my hospitals in 2016, and I was going to retire. But another long story short, I ended up starting another company in biotech, and I hope to be one of the first stem cell approvals in the United States for in animal health. Hopefully in the next 6 to 9 months if everything goes well.
Wow.
So even though I started off wanting to be that veterinarian, I went into all different directions, but stayed in animal health.
Yeah, but you're definitely an entrepreneur, which is really good. I totally appreciate. So Merideth, you always wanted to be in movies?
That came later when I was in college, but I always wanted to be a writer. We had a kind of a big backyard, and we had a big tree, and I would get my little metal pail, and I'd put a thermos of milk and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a notebook and a pen, and then I would put a rope, and then I'd climb the tree, and then I'd grab the bucket and I'd bring it up, and I would write up there. And well, I had 4 sisters, so it was in a pretty small house, 1.5 bathrooms with my 2 parents. So, I needed a place to be alone, and the tree was my place to be alone. And I would write up there. So I always wanted to write, and I always kept journals. And so, I write now. And then when I went to UT, that's sort of where I decided I wanted to be in filmmaking. And I paid my way through college by being a secretary to presidents and CEOs. My mother made sure I knew shorthand and typing, and I would get these good gigs, paid a lot of money, and that's how I put myself through college. And that's when I decided I want to be in filmmaking, and I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So my first company was called Cool Films, and my second Zen Film, and then my company now is called Boss Media. So I wanted to be in communications, and I wanted to work for myself. But I really wanted to actually be a spy when I was in elementary school. That's what I really wanted to be. So I've still got that to look forward to. Nobody's a little old lady.
That's cool. Because I worked for USAID, I was often thought to be the CIA operative overseas. And I lived on the beach in Grenada and had a waterfront house, and the the Rastamen on the beach would say, "Hey, CIA man, how you doing today?" And this was right after the U.S. government sent people in and overthrew the Marxist people. So, but it's okay being mistaken for it. So, hey, Garry, so you always wanted to be an engineer? Did you know what you wanted to be?
Well, here's what I did. We were kind of short on money. I knew I had to put myself through college, and I knew whatever I chose to do, I have to get a job right away, no questions asked. And I knew I was good in math and science. And I don't know if anyone remembered, they actually had a programming class our senior year. It was actually paper tape was the interface. It was so old-fashioned you wouldn't believe it, but I loved it. So that's how I picked engineering. That's how I picked my school, and because I knew I could get a job if I did okay, so I was able to do that. So it wasn't so much I wanted to be an engineer, but I knew I'd be good at it, and I needed a job. So it was just that simple.
Yeah. Well, I understand that. So, and I did computer classes very early on, and it was meteoric. I couldn't imagine, the computers have been very good to me along with health, and just intertwining the two has been good. So, Bob, you always wanted to fly a plane, right?
I did. Going back to the original question Nancy was talking about, you always heard from your parents. I wish I knew now what I knew then, what I know now, and that's the truth in my case. I didn't have any guidance getting into this field. Nobody at the guidance counselors knew anything about it. There was a lot of colleges they never heard of. So I was kind of blind going into it. And the degrees I got are virtually worthless. I would have rather gotten a finance degree and minored in aviation, but I thought I needed all, I wore glasses when I was in the 5th grade, which was a no-no for pilot, and didn't let it stop me, but figured I needed every advantage I could get. So that's why I went to Riddle, which was considered the best, and got my degree in aviation. And it's kind of a worthless degree. If I would recommend kids go get a finance degree or get a degree in something other than just flying, because a flying career is only as good as your medical. If you can't pass your medical, your career is over. So, and that can happen to a young guy. There's a lot of stuff that can disqualify you from this profession. Right. So I always wanted to do it. I cleaned up my act in junior high school and got my grades up and did everything. But I wish I had a little more guidance. Timmy Sullivan was in our class. His dad was a American Airlines PFE out of JFK. He had guidance. He kind of knew what to do. I kind of meandered through. I did well, but I wish I could have done things a lot quicker. When I was flying for the owner of the Celtics, I was kind of stuck in that bubble for a while, and it was an interesting job. We did a lot of cool stuff, flew out of neat places, but the money was terrible, and you work basically 24/7, 365. Literally I've worked 3 days without sleep, which is I couldn't do anymore. But yeah, I just had a discussion with a flight attendant whose son wants to do this, and I said, don't go to Embry-Riddle, go get a degree in something more productive, and then go to a flight school and get all your degrees and get all your ratings in 8 to 10 months, pay for it, get it done. Because, there's not really much to fall back on my degree if I couldn't have continued flying, But,
yeah.
Not kind of specialized stuff like you guys are talking about, like you did and Garry did and John did. And, well, that stuff is pretty specific,
Yeah, so, but when I talk to you on the phone, you're happy.
Oh no,
you've got
great.
You got a great life.
Time off till I got an airline job. It gave me a chance to, people used to think I lived in Maui because I was always out there windsurfing. They thought I lived there, and I would just jump on a plane and fly out there, windsurf, jump on a plane, fly back, go do my trip. So my timing was off. We had the controller strike and the recession, and I was always in the wrong place, the wrong time. But I made the job work because it gave me time off to do other stuff, have a lot of fun. And I try to have as much fun as I can every day. I don't waste a minute. I'm always doing something. So
yeah, that Sounds good. 16 to 24-hour flights, and flying. I flew out to Arizona, and it was like over in a split second. It was nothing.
I was just there this week.
Yeah. Well, I started this trip in Phoenix to Sedona, and I have to say Sedona is a very nice place if you haven't been there. Very magical.
Yeah, I've been there.
A little over the top in some things, but so right now in Santa Fe, which is super rich, super wealthy, an arts community, but it's nice. I'm enjoying it. So
You're in Santa Fe right now?
Yeah, I'm in Santa Fe right now.
Okay, I was gonna say that doesn't look like your home studio.
No, I left my home studio to do this, and I told Gene I would try to keep this short so we can go to dinner. So anyhow, the last question I have is, and we'll start with John. Was there anybody in Wantagh or anything about Wantagh that influenced you that you remember now that you're 64? The Beatle year. Is there something about Wantagh that influenced you? That's the question.
That's a tough question. There was a lot, obviously, that influenced me. I think what I was most grateful for was I think we all got a pretty good education, and that was sort of the cornerstone of what led me to be able to go to obviously to college and to veterinary school and do my internship and residency. So when I look back, it was a lot of really good teachers that I respected, that I learned how to learn from. And I would say for me, that's what I look back on as probably being key to where I am today.
That's good. That's good. I'm going to go to Gary. Gary keeps on running out of bandwidth, and that's why he keeps on falling off. But it's cool. Gary, anything about Wantagh that resonates with you?
Well, I promise. I do pay my Verizon Fios bill, so I don't know what the hell's going on with my bandwidth here. But probably a couple of things that stand out were I really only remember one teacher who I really changed my life, and that was Mr. Maz. I was pretty much into music back then, and I'm kind of sad I never did anything with it, but he really taught us how to explore beyond what was written on the page, and that just taught me a lot. And I think the other thing was a lot of the people there, the friends, the families I got to know real well, we seem to have a common set of values, and I see that coming through today. There's a handful of folks that I see on a regular basis, and we always wonder, like after a few scotches, why is it that we keep getting together? And it seems to be a common set of values. So I think that was also helpful in growing up. And like most of you, I had no confidence either, but I think that was the foundation where I could develop it.
Cool. Nancy, your turn.
Yeah, that is a tough question. But what I keep coming back to is your friends were your base. And when you went off to college and you came back for the summers, you always knew that base was there. So most of the kids went to college, some didn't go to college, but you always knew when you came home after you dumped your laundry out that your friends would be there and you'd be together with them. And I think that meant a lot growing up, also just sharing stories and talking to them. It is kind of sad though that I'm really not, other than one friend, and she was in a different year than me. I don't know how many of you know Ann Long with Dan Catani now. I'm still friendly with her, but it's funny that you were so close with these people, and then every time you came back home, the group got a little smaller and a little smaller, and even after college. And after you got married, you might have had a group that you stayed with, but then it just kept getting smaller and smaller till it just vanished. And that's kind of sad. It's funny. I'll just say something really quick. I went to one of the high school reunions, and it was one of the small ones. It was at Lanook, and over the years I was friendly with Tommy because I'd stop in Lanook, and the whole time I was there, I didn't even sit with the group. I sat with Tommy and his mother at the bar, and I was like, well, that didn't get me anywhere. But it's funny how all that just vanished, all the high school stuff. I don't know about you guys if you're still friendly with any of your high school friends, but they still meant a lot to me, even though they're not around anymore.
Yeah. I'm with. I remember Jean Preller, and that's who I'm with now. So well,
that doesn't count.
Yeah. So no, I am not friends with many people. I was really happy that Garry came and watched me play baseball. I mean, that was so nice of him to do in Vero Beach. And, it does reconnect us to, the people we knew. And,
but, now that you see all the similarities with all the people, like everyone's saying they're not confident and everyone's saying, we realize, as you said many times, how similar we are. And maybe that was a good thing about this group, is that if we do have another reunion, maybe we will reach out to some people that we saw on these things and maybe talk about some old things that happened in Wantagh. I think one of the biggest things this past year is the Wantagh 5 and 10 closed down. How could that be? There's no more Wantagh 5 and 10. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Unbelievable, right?
And then Otto's the year before, or a couple of years
well,
before.
Otto's moved. It's still there.
Yeah, Otto's has to be on Park Avenue.
I know.
To be. So
yeah.
And exactly a mile away from my home, where I, because I was only allowed to walk a mile away, and that was Otto's. So, Bob, what are your thoughts? Anything that you take forward from Wantagh?
I think we didn't know it at the time, but after I moved to the South, I realized how good the education was in the New York area. Didn't know it at the time, kind of like John was saying. I don't remember anybody dropping out. We always had BOCES, so if people didn't really like the academic portion, they could learn a trade. And I moved to South Florida, I see all these people that dropped out of high school in their senior year because they just didn't want to go anymore. And it's like, we never heard of that. We were taking Regents tests, and we were doing calculus in 12th grade, and I didn't realize it at the time, but when you look back on it, the discipline you learned in high school and the education just helped build you up for the future, And I didn't know it at the time. Looking back on it, I figured it out.
Except for the fact that when we were in 11th grade, someone stole the Regents.
That was the best.
I didn't take it that year. That was
right.
Happy.
Oh, my prayers were answered.
That was
the best
I
think
thing.
Everybody was happy.
It was the perfect time to get out of school. Merideth, I know that you didn't graduate from high school from Wantagh, but is there stuff from Wantagh that resonates for you?
Yeah, I think it's probably maybe the sentimental things. I'll give you an example. So I've got my son is Tucker, and he's 17, and he hears a lot about Wantagh and me growing up and what it was like, and 4 sisters. And I did walk a mile in the snow to Beach Street Elementary. But, sort of, I think about the casualness of our parents in particular. And, my parents used to go have cocktails down the street with somebody. And one of the many stories my dad would tell is that they were having cocktails 2 or 3 houses down. And I was a baby at the time, and I was in a crib. And my dad, of course, he hooked up a microphone, probably the one for Old Joe Pumpkin, and put it in the bedroom. And then they put the dog, not our dog, but somebody else's dog, in the bedroom. And they would say, "Is Mary okay? Roof, roof. How's she doing? Roof, roof." And that's pretty much how the babysitting went that night while they were having cocktails. So, there's a lot of stories like that where very offhand sort of bringing us up, which I am amazed by, but I'm also sort of reminiscent and think about that a lot. You came in when it was dark, and you heard my dad's whistle down the street, and between go outside and find something to do and it's dark, you've got to come home. They had no idea what we were doing, and everybody seemed to be fine with that. Because again, I think it was just a gaggle of friends and people and neighbors. So I think about that quite a bit. That and the weekend summers at Jones Beach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For
So
sure.
that's always on my mind quite a bit when I think about Wantagh and growing up.
Yeah. Before we close, I just wanted to touch on something Nancy said. The reason I started this was a belief that we actually had more in common back in high school than we let on. We were clicked. We were in groups, and we stayed in those groups because we were afraid to be out of those groups. And I don't remember being a part of any group. I would move. I played sports, but I didn't hang with people except for the kids in my neighborhood. And, and I could name every one of them and what their birthdays are and still can do that. But, it's the, now that we're 64, that's what I thought about. We had in common a lot back then, and we have a lot in common now, that ties us together. And I don't know that we're going to have a 50th reunion. I'm uncertain of it. But I thought that if I could do these groups of 75, of the class of 75, there'd be enough cross-pollination that people might want to, to get together without it being this big reunion. Mm-hmm. So, and COVID being what it was, me being locked in my office at home. So, I just thought the group was good. And so with that said,
thank you, Glenn. Really,
I just want to relay, Gary just wanted to say thank you and say goodnight to everyone, but he's having trouble getting back on.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Yeah.
You're the last of the class of 75 that'll be going. I appreciate that you took the time to join today, and I hope you have a good life going forward, and I hope we see one another at some point on the 50th. So, all right. So you all have a great day.
Thanks, Glenn. Nice job.
Everybody.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Good evening,
See everybody.
everybody.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
dinner.
All right.
Enjoy